This is the X-Zone Broadcast Network, broadcasting worldwide on broadcast affiliates and satellite program providers, including CNN Broadcast Network, Sirius Satellite Network, Star Media, Good News Radio Network, Angel Broadcast Network, Wiki Broadcast Network, and WPBN TV. For more information on the X-Zone Broadcast Network, visit us at www.xzbn.net.
Hi, curious minds out there in Radio Land. Welcome to CC with BB, Connecting with Coincidence with Dr. Bernie Beitman, MD. That's me. This is the only radio show in the world dedicated to the study of coincidences, synchronicity, and serendipity. We are coming to you through X-Zone Broadcast Network, located in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada, and broadcasting all over the world. I'm a psychiatrist. I like to help people, and I use medications and psychotherapy. In other words, I work with both the brain and the mind. To study coincidences, you need your mind to recognize them and your brain to talk about them. Coincidences are spoken here. Coincidences alert us to the mysterious hiding in plain sight. In other words, coincidence alert us to possible causal connections not recognized by modern science. Put Connecting with Coincidence in your search engine and find my Psychology Today blog, my website, and my social media sites. Would you like to know how sensitive you are to coincidences? Go ahead and take the Weird Coincidence survey. You'll find it on my website. Well, why study coincidences? One of the reasons, as we will learn today, is in our discussion with philosopher Michael Grosso. The coincidences have an influential role in religious thought. And we'll talk about just how that might happen with Dr. Grosso, who is also a very good friend of mine. Coincidences teach us to study probability. These low probability events make the coincider, that is the person experiencing the coincidence, more willing to believe in higher guiding intelligence. One of the stories that came out of our research on coincidences at the University of Missouri involved what we call synchronicity sisters, a story called Synchronicity Sisters. What happened with this woman and who was involved in it was, who reported it to us, she was sitting at home with her children, waiting to pick up her husband at the local airport. As she was waiting, she received information that the plane would be late. And she began to mull over the problems she was having with her husband. He was abusive both to her and her children. And it was hard for him to stop. She'd asked him many times. They tried various means to make the relationship better, but his abuse continued. As she mulled over the problems in the marriage and the problems in the family, she received a phone call, and it was a wrong number. And for some reason, the woman on the phone just started talking about a marriage, her marriage, that was in deep trouble. Her husband was also abusive and was also abusive to the children. Well, the person reporting this story received that information that the plane had been delayed. And during that time that she heard that the plane would be delayed and this anonymous phone call from a woman upset about her own marriage, the woman reporting the story concluded that that's me. That woman on the other line is just like me. And she told me that she has decided not to see her husband anymore and to get a divorce. And that really must be the decision I make. She called her husband when he arrived at the airport and told him the marriage was over. As she thought back about it in her report to us, she said, I didn't believe in God before, but that phone call coming just at the right time, just when I needed something to tell me what I knew I needed to do, but I was afraid to. That woman's anxiety and fear helped drive me to make a decision that I knew I had to make. I now believe in God. I believe this was willed by some higher power influencing me in some way to do the right thing. Coincidences can do that to us, and they have done that to religions and religious followers over many years. We look in the Old Testament, and what do we find? An amazing coincidence with the parting of the Red Sea. How did it happen that right when the Israelites got to that shore, that the waters parted and allowed them to make their escape? And then the waters closed. That's a coincidence of colossal importance, and suggests another way in which religious stories are peppered with coincidences that help us believe, just as the woman in the story that I just told you was able to come to a belief in a higher power in God. Michael Grosso will help us understand in more detail just how it is that over the many millennia of religious activity and philosophy, religion has been influenced by coincidences. And the story of the Red Sea and stories like that will be something that we will discuss in our next segment.
This is the X-Zone Broadcast Network, broadcasting worldwide on broadcast affiliates and satellite program providers, including CNN Broadcast Network, Sirius Satellite Network, Star Media, Good News Radio Network, Angel Broadcast Network, Wiki Broadcast Network, and WPBN TV. For more information on the X-Zone Broadcast Network, visit us at www.xzbn.net.
How would you like to be able to read other people's minds? Well, the next best thing is here. When you know how to read a person's name, you know how the person thinks, feels, and behaves. Each letter in our name holds a key to unlock our true essence. Our name contains both our gifts and challenges in this lifetime. Mnemology science discovers personality secrets hidden in the placement of the letters of our names, including the first and last impression people remember about us. Sharon shows us how to interpret the arrangement of letters as outlined in her book, Know the Name, Know the Person. Sharon Lynn Wyeth created mnemology science after 18 years of research and testing her theories, and has supported thousands of people around the world in understanding themselves and others better. You'll enjoy Sharon's unique teachings as she shares her system to learn the gifts behind your given birth name. Even if you don't like your birth name, there are jewels in this book. If you're thinking of changing your name, ready to name your child, or wanting to get along better with others, this is the book for you. If you'd like to improve your relationships and change your life for the better, get the book today, Know the Name, Know the Person, or visit www.knowthename.com. That's www.knowthename.com.
Take a step back in time and discover old Florida cuisine at Marsh Landing Restaurant in Fellsmere, Florida. Enjoy delicacies such as frog legs, gator tail, catfish, and swamp cabbage, or enjoy the more traditional cuisine such as hand-cut Angus steaks, ribs, and seafood. Join us for breakfast with a southern flair featuring sweet potato pancakes, biscuits and gravy, and much more. Planning a party? Marsh Landing's private dining rooms can accommodate groups from 8 to 80 people. While you visit, enjoy the historic pictures, artifacts, and stories that line the walls. Marsh Landing is truly a unique experience. Marsh Landing Restaurant, 44 North Broadway in historic downtown Fellsmere, or visit marshlandingrestaurant.com. Marsh Landing, Old Florida cuisine at its best.
If you're a seeker, don't miss the inspiring book Shamanic Awakening, Between the Dark and the Daylight. This remarkable work chronicles shamanic counselor and indigenously trained dream decoder Sandra Cochran's 35 years of experience with diverse wisdom keepers throughout the Americas. Sandy's initiations across the British Isles, Turkey, Greece, and Egypt, combined with her knowledge of symbology, psychology, and myth, influence her dream blog and workshops. Sandy offers private readings, sacred international journeys, a meditative CD, and her book, Shamanic Awakening, to encourage you as you navigate your earth walk and create a deeper connection to yourself. Find this and more at her website, starwalkervisions.com.
Welcome back to CC with BB, Connecting with Coincidence with Dr. Bernie Beitman, MD, the only radio program in the world that is studying coincidences, synchronicity, and serendipity. Our guest today is Michael Grosso, Dr. Michael Grosso, a Ph.D. in philosophy, a well-respected philosophy teacher, and an excellent psychological philosopher for those who seek counsel from him. He is the author of the recent book, The Man Who Could Fly, the story of St. Joseph of Cupertino, who could levitate. And we will get to psychokinesis and religion as part of this discussion. I know we will. Michael and I have met through DOPS, the Division of Perceptual Studies here at the University of Virginia, and formed a group called the Minders, where we think about things. Us minders think about things that are related to parapsychological phenomena like psychokinesis, telepathy, and religion and psychokinesis and telepathy. Michael, welcome to the program.
Well, thank you, Bernie. It's good to talk with you, and I enjoyed your introduction.
Well, thank you very much. Would you tell us about a coincidence that stands out in your own personal experience?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. There is one especially that I remember, especially around Christmas time. This is a sort of a romantic story. Some years ago, it was a Christmas Eve, and I was with my girlfriend, and we had gone to midnight mass together, and we kind of got into a bit of a spat. And by the time we got back home, we were feeling sort of turned off from each other. And it turned out that that night was, and this is important for the story, the coldest night of that very year. It was about 0. And the apartment where I lived, which was in Edgewater, New Jersey, overlooking the Hudson River, was bitter cold. That's an important fact. So it turned out that we were so sort of irritated with each other on this holiday evening that we slept in separate spaces and glumly ended the evening together that way. In the morning, however, something amazing happened. I had a plant in the house, a Dracaena fragrans. It's a tropical plant. And overnight, it bloomed. And I was awakened in the morning by my friend who was hovering over me, and she said, "Do you smell that?" And I smelled, and the entire apartment was filled with the richest, sweetest smell that you can possibly imagine. And I looked up, and there was my Dracaena plant, had burst into all kinds of buds and white flowers. So we started to think about this thing. It blew our minds. It felt some, magical and wonderful. A plant in Arctic weather, a tropical plant flowering and blessing us, so it seemed, with these wonderful fragrances. We immediately embraced and made up. And the effect of this amazing coincidence or strange phenomenon was to bring us back together again. That's the point. Then after that, I did a little research. I went to the Bronx Botanical Gardens, and I described the plant and what had happened. And everybody that I spoke to there just shook their heads and said to me, "That's impossible. That's a miracle." That was the word that the woman used. I went around to different florists in the neighborhood and asked the same question, and they had the same response. So this is a wonderful illustration, I think, of synchronicity, or whatever you want to call it, a coincidence that certainly suggested to both of us some kind of overriding intelligence, a kind of a gift. My friend called it a Christmas card from heaven. And it was quite an astonishing experience. And call it a coincidence, I've never heard that particular plant blossoming anywhere in any time of the year. Although one person told me that she had a plant like that, and it did flower on a hot day during the summer once.
The general idea of plants flowering at times of high emotion, just as birds sometimes show up at times of high emotion, most commonly at least described around death. And this have been reported, of course, and maybe not as dramatic a thing as this, but the most important flower of the deceased blooms at a time during the funeral that is unexpected, a time of year that's unexpected, is not an uncommon description. But this is a little odder. You and I have been interested in trying to figure out how things like this work. So it's one thing to say it's a divine gift, which it certainly can feel like, but how do you think that happened, Mike?
Well, again, I was describing how I felt.
Yes.
I don't really know. I find it incredible that this was just some kind of unexplained plant freak accident. It seemed that, the timing, there's something about the archetypes of timing here that may come into play. One possibility, and this is extravagant, but it's hard for me to believe that the divine being out there decided to do this just to make us two lovers feel good. On the other hand, it's not inconceivable to me that at some subliminal level, our joint PK, psychokinetic abilities, collaborated unconsciously, of course, and acted upon the plant. We have evidence of, from psychical research, that intentional effort can accelerate, or even if a person is depressed, retard the growth of plants. So we know that kind of PK influence is possible. So rather than drag in the divine being himself or herself, which seems wildly sort of, I don't know, extravagant on our part, I would conclude that event may have been created by ourselves. Doesn't make it any the less amazing.
Well, as you know even better than I, when you end up having the final cause be the cause, there's no argument. When you can say that it's God did it, there's no way of disproving that. Right. And if you want to believe it, you can. But what you and I are trying to do, and I think many others, is maybe not go to God so fast. Right. Maybe recognize the powers that we have that have something to do with making them happen. Just as you just described, as the psychokinetic of your desire to be together somehow did something to the plant that made it bloom and brought you together. I like that explanation as a start much better.
Yeah, but another way we could put it, Bernie, is to say that the divine element in the universe, and I believe that there is something like that.
Oh yeah.
Can act through us in these ways. So it needn't be an either or. It neither be just a plea for human capacity, but it may be a phenomenon that illustrates the interaction between human potential and something outside of us that's operating on us and through us in mysterious ways.
No denying that. There's something with psychokinesis and the greater something that we're all part of that can work in synergy, and that's what you're suggesting.
Yeah.
Let's go on to what the main subject of this of our conversation. I really want to hear more from you about the role of religion, role of coincidence in religion. I mentioned the Red Sea parting. Tell us start telling us about the role of coincidence in religion.
I'll give you an example from the book that I wrote and the case that I'm most familiar with. Of all of the saints in the history of the Catholic Church, Joseph of Cupertino is probably the most extraordinary in terms of producing all kinds of unusual phenomena. So he's a wonderful case to illustrate. And what I want to say, I want to give some examples very quickly.
Before you give the examples, give us a little background, like place and time of Joseph.
Yeah, well, all right. He lived 1603 to 1663 in southern Italy during the Baroque period, and during the church was, struggling at that time in the 17th century, both with science and with the Protestant Reformation. But it was also a period of rich mysticism, and the more mystical you get, the greater the number of reported miracles and strange phenomena. So Joseph was an example of an extraordinarily focused kind of a mystic. He's been called the greatest ecstatic of all times, and being in an ecstatic state seems to be empirically related to the occurrence of these unusual phenomena.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Particularly the levitations, and there's no way we can talk about the levitations as coincidences, by the way. Either he was up in the air or not. That's not a coincidence.
That's not a coincidence. It's a mechanism that we wonder about, but it's not a coincidence. I agree.
Exactly. So that's just a little background on Joseph. And I will say this, that when you are that successful in producing amazing phenomena, it can impact on your life big time. And it did. The church kept Joseph under surveillance and practically put him under house arrest because they were afraid a guy with so much power could go off and start his own cult or his own religion. Not that he ever did. Not that he ever
would. Yeah. And at the same time, he was under house arrest. Another famous Italian was under house arrest.
That's right. Galileo at the very same time. And I often try to imagine what it would be like if by chance the two of them bumped into each other in a conversation. But what I will say then, that's a little bit on the background.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks.
Of Joseph. I'll just say there are three areas where there are all kinds of reports of divine intervention, miracles, and all of that, which hover in the realm of the coincidental. And my point that I want to make in terms of understanding is that these phenomena, the ambiguous cases, occur in situations of indeterminacy. In other words, where things are open, fluid, and changing, and you can't quite really explain what's going on. That's when it's as though the natural world is more malleable to these impulses to produce these strange effects. Now, the three areas are healings, and first I'll just talk about healings.
Well, we're coming to the end of this next segment, so list the other two.
The other are examples of, actually there's just two examples, the healings and being saved.
And being saved.
And by invoking St. Joseph when he was a living or even after death. And there are two types that I have think about stories.
Well, we're gonna end in just a minute, and so we'll get back to healing and being saved with Dr. Michael Grosso in our next segment.
This is the X-Zone Broadcast Network, broadcasting worldwide on broadcast affiliates and satellite program providers, including CNN Broadcast Network, Sirius Satellite Network, Star Media, Good News Radio Network, Angel Broadcast Network, Wiki Broadcast Network, and WPBN TV. For more information on the X-Zone Broadcast Network, visit us at www.xzbn.net.
There's a legend shared by many indigenous cultures of a time when the nations were cast to the four corners of the world. Each nation was given a body of sacred knowledge that held a different portion of the truth to preserve. True reality could not be known until all the nations reunited, combining the information. If a single one was missing, the world could not be reborn and darkness would prevail. The Science of Magic Radio is dedicated to reuniting the sacred knowledge. With the understanding, none of us has all the answers, but together we can open new perceptions and possibilities. Through our combined vision, the world can be reborn into a place where darkness no longer prevails. Join me, Gwilda Wiyaka, and the Science of Magic daily on the X-Zone Broadcast Network, xzbn.net, or visit us at thescienceofmagic.net.
Gibbs A. Williams, Ph.D., is a practicing psychoanalyst, supervisor, researcher, and author in New York City. Much of his life has been dedicated to understanding nature and the uses of meaningful coincidences or synchronicities. His radical and original non-Jungian, non-mystical, non-magical theory of synchronicities illuminates much of the fog surrounding this challenging and perplexing topic. His ideas and manners are fresh, presented in a style that is both entertaining and highly informative. He is also an expert on crisis intervention, specially focused on violence reduction for the police and citizens, mastering anxiety, frustration, and stress without the use of medication, and effectively preventing and treating heroin addiction. Dr. Williams can be contacted at his email address at gwwilliamsny11@aol.com or visit his website at Did you know that when you're on the road with limited data or Wi-Fi, you can still listen to the X-Zone Radio Show with Rob McConnell, The Science of Magic with Gwilda Wiyaka, X-1, Dimension X, Space Patrol, and every minute of the X-Zone Broadcast Network by calling 213-401-0080, courtesy of Audio Now. No smartphone, app, or internet needed. It saves your data plan and it's free if you have unlimited minutes. Call 213-401-0080 to listen on any phone, anytime, anywhere. Remember 213-401-0080 for the best of the paranormal, parapsychology, and sci-fi radio programming anywhere, 24/7, 365.
True healing must address 4 levels: physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual, for us to live joyful and productive lives. We tend to treat 3 of the 4, leaving the spiritual languishing. If you're tired of the same dysfunctional patterns cropping up in your life, soul balancing is for you. Trixie Phelps, owner and founder of Soul Balancing, is a naturally gifted energy healer trained in numerous esoteric forms, including shamanism. Trixie has created a powerful modality that safely and effectively clears your energetic field. A soul balancing session can remove interference, heal trauma, and restore your hope. Contact Trixie for a life-changing long-distance session today, www.soulbalancing.world.
Welcome back to CC with BB, the only radio program in the world focusing on coincidences. Our guest today is Michael Grosso, philosopher, teacher, and expert in psychokinesis, among other things, talking to us about coincidences in religion. Now, Michael, you were talking about healing and being saved. They're kind of related to each other as a rich area of experience where in which coincidences are likely to happen connected to religion.
Absolutely. And I want to begin with just an example of a reported miracle that I'm convinced was just a coincidence. But it illustrates how coincidence can inspire beliefs in the supernatural.
Now this just a coincident phrase, my little ears alert, because I think you're saying that it really was something that doesn't need to be explained in any non-conventional terms. Probability is the best way of talking about it.
Yes, I mean, and this is a story about dead sheep. There's an account in the writings about Joseph. It's not documented. Thus, I was immediately suspect for that. But just a little story that was thrown in about Joseph saving a bunch of dead sheep that had been killed in a terrible storm, a lightning storm and hailstorm. And there wasn't a great deal said about it, but except that a bunch of sheep were involved. Now, from what I can make out, what probably happened, and again, this is speculation because there's not that much data, but it's a good example to illustrate what probably happened. There probably was a storm. There probably was a tremendous hailstorm in which the sheep were disoriented, maybe struck by hailstones and fell down on the ground. And the farmer, or rather the shepherd, knowing about Padre Giuseppe, calls out, "Joseph, help me, my sheep are being killed." And he looks around and the sheep are all sort of on the ground. And in a couple of minutes, they start to recover. They get up, stunned, you see. They get up.
That's great. That's great. That's great. That's great. Yeah.
Story that God resurrected a bunch of sheep. I don't know, you see, but I see how it works in that case. Okay.
That's a great story. Yes. They were just, the sheep were stunned and got up around the same time Joseph was invoked. That's great.
That's right. But I don't mean to imply by any means that other reported phenomena and claims of intervention did not operate. For example, the healing stories, they exist in abundance of particularly women in childbirth. There are actually 22 cases recorded of women in childbirth that called upon St. Joseph, either while he was still living, especially when he was still living, because his influence is so powerful, or even after death. And in 22 of these cases, it seemed as though there was a connection between some unusual, sudden. By the way, they always say that these healings are almost instantaneous, and the pleas that the people were making to Joseph. Now, there's no way, unless you look at the medical records, and there are some cases are pretty accurate and detailed. There's no way we can decide on what was really going on in these cases. But it's clear that the slightest sign of improvement after a prayer is going to be interpreted as an intervention. We don't hear about all of the stories in which people desperately pray for help and they get no response.
Right. That's so important. Yes.
But sometimes we do, you see. And again, it's difficult to sort out. Many of the cases that have been reported, if accurate, definitely do strike me as difficult to account for in any normal way, especially the claims that these healings took place immediately. And there are other records, cases on record, detailed corroborations of healings that have indeed been virtually instantaneous. So I can't rule it out.
One of the things that I want our listeners to realize about you, Mike, is how attuned to supporting references to described events you are. How you in your book on Joseph and in so many other ways try to not just take somebody's word for it or somebody's some one observer. You try to get as much information as you can, and to verify whether or not something has happened that seems outstanding. And it's important to know that there are people like you who come to the study of anomalous events with a scientific mind, and you are demonstrating that very nicely in your description.
Well, thank you. I think the beautiful thing is that the data is there, and it's a question of simply doing your homework. Now, there's another thing I want to talk about that where the indeterminacy comes into play, but it's rather fascinating the way these wonderful coincidences apparently took place.
Would you define indeterminacy for
in other words, there are two kinds of ways you can do a dice throwing experiment. You can try to influence the fall of dice as the dice are being shaken up and moving through space. And you can also try to take a die that's sitting down still and try to move it by PK. It turns out that the latter is very difficult. But when a die is in motion, it is more indeterminate what the outcome is going to be. Is it going to land? It's going to become a 2 or a 6 or a 4. You see, no one knows. It's in motion. And so that indeterminacy allows for an influence to be more effective.
Well said.
And so this is the interesting thing that I wanted to describe was Joseph's practice. He would write down little sayings from St. Francis, who was his hero, in his own handwriting. And he would cut these bits of paper up, these little quotations up, and he would hand them to people and tell them to use them in an emergency. And the idea is to get rid of them in an emergency. For example, there are several stories of individuals being caught in storms at sea and feeling as though they were going to be submerged and lose their lives in a terrible storm at sea.
I'm hearing Jonah in the whale right now.
Okay. I didn't think of that. But this is what's involved here in the stories that I've read involve throwing the written blessing into the sea. I don't know.
Throwing Jonah into the sea. That's right.
Yeah. However, but and then they come back. The storm suddenly stops. You see.
That's what happened with Jonah. That's right.
Or there's a wonderful story of again a whole family going along on a donkey and getting in a cart and getting caught in a storm where the donkey and the cart practically toppled into a ravine, and at the last minute they're crying out for help, and suddenly the whole vehicle is free and so on. Again, you have to look at the details and make the calculations.
Yes.
But what I'm saying is that it's in these critical situations that the calls are made and the astonishing events take place. There's one other thing I wanted to.
On that, my way of having said that, indeterminacy, which is a nice summary of what I've been trying to say, is that coincidences are more likely during times of transition, high need, and high emotion. And what indeterminacy does, particularly with your dice in the air analogy, is sharpens my words into something more descriptive and visualizable. Indeterminacy with dice in the air is a great way of describing what I have been describing with different words.
Which, by the way, Bernie, touches on another theme that we've discussed in the past, and that is if you want to take place. In other words, if you're looking for a mate, it's no use sitting at home and staring at movies. You got to go out and interact with the world and increase the likelihood where the unpredictable might happen.
Oh, that's good. That's good. The way I say it is the dog that trots about finds a bone. You've got to be moving, creating indeterminacy, which increases. That's nice. That's much clearer than the way I was talking about it.
So There was one other thing I just have to mention in this context here, and it's a phenomenon that we're all familiar with. And I think this may be another illustration of a false interpretation of the miraculous.
Uh-huh.
Over and over again, we hear stories of people escaping with their lives in terrible accidents, or, some maniac comes into a scene and shoots a bunch of people up, and one person escapes by the skin of their teeth. Over and over again, and it's perfectly natural, I'm not criticizing it, people will emerge from such experiences with the impression that that God chose them to survive. They feel gratitude to God, who they feel saved them. That always struck me as understandable, but also somehow narcissistic and incredible. I mean, why?
Why you? Why you?
Yeah, exactly. Why, 50 people got murdered and you escaped. And gratitude, yes, but to imagine that God picked you out, but that's how people feel. That's my point.
Well, what's the other option? The other option is random, and that's no fun.
The other option is common sense. They got lucky.
Well, that's what I mean by random. It just didn't happen. But even the word lucky implies something that the person is doing.
Yeah.
That the lucky person, if you look at the research on luck, the lucky person is one who tends to feel he's lucky. You get more luck happening when you think you're a lucky guy.
Well, I think you're right about that. I was very lucky when I was a poor college student. I used to play poker to make up for my poverty, and I was an incredibly lucky dude.
Well, I think you had a need there, and I think you were amped up.
I was impoverished, and I needed some money to buy cigarettes. So I won in poker.
So we've talked about indeterminacy and luck, and we got about another minute or left in this segment. Where are we going to go in our next segment, Mike?
Oh, we have another segment.
Yes.
You tell me. I'm really receptive to your questions. I don't have any.
I'd like to be able to talk more about the way religious thought is influenced by coincidence, and maybe not just around Joseph, but around more standard texts and parables and stories from the prophets. Other stories that seem to be able to indicate how coincidences have played a role. One of the things that religious people do is use coincidence to say my religion is proved, my God is proved by this coincidence. My belief is substantiated, and that makes my belief better than yours, rather than be able to say there's something that we're all sharing.
Right.
So we're gonna end this segment now, and we will be back with Dr. Michael Grosso in just a bit.
Okay.
This is the X-Zone Broadcast Network, broadcasting worldwide on broadcast affiliates and satellite program providers, including CNN Broadcast Network, Sirius Satellite Network, Star Media, Good News Radio Network, Angel Broadcast Network, Wiki Broadcast Network, and WPBN TV. For more information on the X-Zone Broadcast Network, visit us at www.xzbn.net.
Did you know that when you're on the road with limited data or Wi-Fi, you can still listen to the X-Zone Radio Show with Rob McConnell, The Science of Magic with Gwilda Wiyaka, X-1, Dimension X, Space Patrol, and every minute of the X-Zone Broadcast Network by calling 213-401-0080, courtesy of Audio Now. No smartphone, app, or internet needed. It saves your data plan, and it's free if you have unlimited minutes. Call 213-401-0080 to listen on any phone, anytime, anywhere. Remember 213-401-0080 for the best of the paranormal, parapsychology, and sci-fi radio programming anywhere, 24/7, 365.
I am Dr. Carl O'Helvey, founder, president of a new cancer foundation focusing on evidence-based physical, mental, and spiritual interventions, including natural cancer cures, prayer, meditation, affirmations, nutrition, and other related holistic cancer prevention and cure modalities. These are used in cancer education, research, and financing care. I ask for your help to continue this important work by donating at www.holisticcancerfoundation.com.
Wouldn't you love to know the secret to everything? I'm Dr. Kimberly McGeorge, and on The Secret to Everything, we will merge the practical with open investigation into all realms of the mysterious. We will talk to cutting-edge alternative health practitioners, those who inspire and motivate you in business and life, and of course, we will share stories of the paranormal, conspiracy, and cryptozoology. You will transform because of the frequency I carry, the frequencies my guests carry. Life may never be the same after you listen to this program, for the secret to everything is for you, the listener, for those who desire more in every area of their lives and believe that it can still be found. Listen and discover thesecrettoeverything.com.
Little children aren't the only ones afraid of the dark. Millions of soldiers return from war zones with PTSD, anger, frustration, fear, and loneliness, much of which surfaces during the darkness of the night. You have the chance to change the lives of these American heroes. Songs and Stories for Soldiers.us provides free MP3 players for these men and women. With a list of 3 million songs in 16 different styles, 100,000 audiobooks, and 30,000 old-time radio programs, every veteran can find something to soothe and comfort them at no cost. All our players contain an 8-hour audio program designed to help veterans fall asleep. With 1,500 plus vets now participating, it's our goal to deliver 10,000 audio players this year. Go to our website at songsandstoriesforsoldiers.us. Help us help a veteran make it through the night.
Welcome back to Connecting with Coincidence with Dr. Bernie Beitman, MD. We're talking with Dr. Michael Grosso, eminent philosopher and teacher, about the relationship between religion and coincidences. So, Michael, tell us more about religion and coincidences.
Okay, I do have some thoughts I want to share. Well, first of all, prayer, as some famous writer's name I've forgotten said, whenever I pray, coincidences tend to happen. And that, again, the parapsychologists can say prayer is a form of could be a form of psychokinesis. But now what I want to say is that it's not just praying. I think the most interesting connection here is with the role of belief and the role of imagination.
Yeah.
So that it's not just that the praying person asks, but he or she expects, hopes, imagines, believes, has an image, a mental image of it actually taking place.
Yeah.
And so it's no accident to my mind that religious people since they are tuned into the possibility of these interventions and these surprises occurring that are coincidentally constructive and helpful, that these are the people who tend to have and to notice these experiences. So the religious perspective at least puts you on the alert that something unusual could happen. and tunes you into makes you more a closer, more habitual observer. Whereas other people, I mean, good things might happen to them coincidentally, and they just don't attach any significance to it. And I think they're cheating themselves of an opportunity to see and to discover and explore a hidden dimension of reality that might be operating on our lives.
And there are, you've just illustrated very clearly again, one of the ways in which people can increase their coincidence sensitivity, that by being religious, they come to expect little miracles during the day, little touches by God. And so they look for them. And when you pray, you're looking for them. So you're more alert to coincidences. There are many reasons why people pay attention to the possibility of coincidences. You're describing beautifully the mechanism by which religious people do so.
Yeah, and you know, and the just the it really, you know, we bring in the placebo effect. I mean, this is not a phenomenon that's confined to the wild and woolly world of religious belief. We have scientific evidence in the medical field for a widespread and overwhelmingly effective thing called the placebo. And a placebo is nothing but a belief and an expectation. Nothing but is the wrong way of putting. When we believe something, more is involved than just a verbal concept of belief. But as I said, expectation, imagination, all of these psychic and psychological processes that seem to mobilize the unconscious, the subliminal mind, and help maybe to liberate these forces and make these things happen.
A key aspect of my giving medications to patients is trying to augment their expectation of a positive response.
Right, right, and that's certainly a part of it, and it's I think this convergence of science and religion through the placebo effect is a very important idea that we should dwell upon and emphasize, don't you think, Bernie?
Yeah, and I hadn't thought about placebo as a link between science and religion, and it has to do with how belief helps to create reality.
Exactly, you said it perfectly, and I mean that old New Age chestnut about creating reality can be overstated.
Oh yes,
and can be very silly and naive in some contexts. On the other hand, there's a lot of hard evidence and good reasons to believe that we are constantly, by choosing to emphasize thinking and feeling about certain things, we are creating our future. We're shaping our interactions with the world. The mind is guiding our minds, our hopes, our desires, our needs, our imaginings are shaping the kind of experience that we have.
I get a kick out of watching sometimes how the quality of my thought influences my own physiological reactions.
Oh, for sure. Oh, for sure. I mean, I sometimes notice the smallest things can, depending on how you interpret them, can act as a stimulant, positive or negative. I've told you in the past, for example, my little habit of noticing the clock. And over again, it's been happening lately like mad. Just at the moment, the part of the day where I'm at my peak, I will notice and I'll look up and it's 4:44 or 2:32 or 2. And I always get a giggle out of it.
Yeah.
Because it's purely coincidence. I'm not even looking, I'm not thinking about this, but it happens over and over again. So who knows what, to what extent we can reshape our lives through this indeterminate potential of shaping positive coincidences.
Well, one of the things that you just implied is to welcome chaos into one's life.
Absolutely, an element of it at the right time in the right place is really a key variable.
Yes. Well, how do you handle negative coincidences and bad omens?
That's such a good question, Bernie, and you may not remember one of the very first things I told you when we first met and we talked about this stuff. I have had on occasion frighteningly weird, ominous coincidental events.
And describe the origin of the word omen.
Omen comes from birds, right?
Yes, you're right.
That birds are
Those birds doing those weird things. That's right.
Right. But I forget what I was going to say.
It was one of the first things you told me was a negative coincidence.
Right. How to deal with it. Exactly. And my policy is this: the instant it looks like an objectively negative omen, unless there's some rationale to make a move to protect myself, I simply reject it out of hand. It never bothers me. I never let a bad dream or a coincidentally negative omen to disturb me, because I am convinced that by paying attention and by investing these events with meaning and psychic energy,
yes,
we increase the likelihood of producing negative effects on ourselves.
It's been said a little different. It's the same thing, different way, that worrying about something becomes kind of a prayer to make it happen.
Exactly. So I think that people who are interested in this should make up their minds and not in other words, work with the positive, play down the negative, don't dwell on it. Because in the end, it's we who are responding to seeds of possibility. And by refusing and rejecting the dark seeds, we're going to be a whole lot better off, I think.
And by thinking about the dark seeds, we help them to germinate and to grow.
Exactly. You know, my view increasingly in terms of just the art of living, so much of life consists of knowing when to stop thinking. People think too much about everything. I catch myself dwelling on things, focusing, making associations. I said, what am I doing this for? This is leading me nowhere. Bang, you get rejected, out, gone. See? And it's important to adopt that attitude.
How have you come to be able to relatively easily get to a state of no thought?
There are meditation techniques, breathing techniques. I will, you know, this is the thing that they tell you when you're a kid, just take a deep breath and stop the breath and let it out very slowly. You immediately start to feel better. But the worst thing that we can do is just surrender to every random thought that comes into our minds. On the other hand, the best thing we can do is be on the alert to the really helpful, inspiring trains of thought that might visit us from time to time.
And how do you make those distinctions in the kind of gray area that some of those thoughts are?
Well, that's based on your experience and your philosophy of life. I mean, right? People have different ideas of what's good and what's bad. If someone tells me that I've won a lot of money, as has been happening recently online, and I don't believe it, I don't get excited about it. I just reject it immediately because I'm not interested in, and I'm suspicious about these cons. So, I mean, the answer is every person has to acquire their own skills from experience and learn how to make judgments.
Well, we have a little less than a minute to go, Michael, and I really appreciate your being on with me. And this question of how to decide what to think or what thoughts to pay attention to is really intriguing to me, because I'm studying intuition, and intuition is a way of getting lots of different pieces of your mind and other minds perhaps talking with you and communicating with you. So maybe sometime as we continue this, when we see each other or some other time, be able to talk about how people can learn to distinguish which intuitive voices, which quiet voices, which impulses, which statements that seem to come from outside of us are the ones we should pay attention to and the ones we should be able to reject. This kind of filtering out mental ideas, mental thoughts is so crucial, and we'll get back to that, you and I, sometime. Thank you very much for being with us, Michael.
Thank you, Tony. My pleasure.